All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Eli, and welcome back to the Athlete Recruitment Code, where we share stories that inspire, challenge, and guide families on the journey to college athletics. So today's guest is someone whose story completely rewrites what's possible for high school athletes. He's a Park City standout, a two-time All-Utah selection, team captain, and the guy who holds 63 career touchdowns with one of the most insane yards per catch stats in Utah history. But what makes him truly special isn't just the numbers, it's the mindset, the discipline, and the way he balanced academics with ambition. So, without further ado, please welcome my friend and someone I deeply respect, Mark McCurdy. Thanks for joining, Mark.
Thanks, Eli.
Awesome opportunity to share some of your stories and get our parents who are listening to understand maybe a little bit more of the nuances and gain some perspective on what made your journey so unique. So can you walk us through, like, I mean, I know you've achieved some amazing feats, but it all started somewhere. So can you walk us through your own recruiting journey from high school to taking that first step at Davidson College?
Yeah, for sure. In high school, I played both football and basketball. I wasn't totally sure which sport I wanted to play because I loved them both in high school. Um, I eventually felt like football was probably the right path for me. And kind of where it really started with that was I just had a couple seasons that really I performed really well, and I kind of realized that I had a future in football, and I started reaching out to coaches, going to camps at on campuses, which we can talk about a little bit later if we want, and then um, yeah, and then Davidson came in and they offered me, and I visited a couple times, and I really felt like it was the perfect fit for me. It was a smaller school, um, beautiful campus, high academic, and yeah, a chance to play early there as well. So that's kind of all of the things that came together as far as getting me to Davidson College.
Awesome. So at Davidson, something that you just mentioned, which is huge, is that like you had the opportunity to play early. Like how valuable is that when you're like weighing options to go to school to know that you can play somewhere versus just like having getting that acceptance letter and like you get into school. How did you understand like that you were going to have the opportunity to make an impact right once you stepped on campus?
Yeah, for sure. So it was really just the messaging that the coaches gave to me, and they really inspired a lot of confidence with the way they recruited me. But I think it's different for everyone. I think some people get that chance early, some people don't, and I think your experience can be just as rewarding either way.
I know that with my journey playing golf, Division One at Dartmouth College, that was something that I was also weighing in for the other opportunities. Like, where can I go somewhere where I can make an impact from day one, but then also have the opportunity to like make a story for myself there, rather than getting somewhere that is an awesome school, but maybe I won't have the opportunities to play. And the key, which you mentioned, is the communication. If you are communicating with the coaches and you really understand, it's not just like, hey, come out and join my camp, and then they kind of ghost you when you message them back. Like that's probably not instilling a lot of confidence when you get there. So make sure that for all the parents, the communication is key to understanding if your child actually has an opportunity to play rather than just a money grab to come join a camp. You also mentioned in your journey that you know you had these outstanding seasons, like, and that gave you the confidence and the ability to commit to knowing that you can play at the next level. But that's kind of at the end. Like, I'm sure there was a lot of buildup and anxiety and stress before that, not knowing if this is the right opportunity. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I thought, like thinking back to recruiting, is that recruiting in the moment feels very personal. Like you get really emotional, and it like kind of feels like like almost like a self worth thing when you're in high school. And it's you gotta know that it's really not that, and especially in football, like you see all these kids getting offers like really young, and like sophomore and junior year, but like you realize the people that are doing that are really the outliers of the outliers, and you kind of through the process you don't want to compare yourself to anyone because everyone's situation is different. And even if it's siblings that you're comparing yourself to, like the situation that you're in now is so different than what the situation of someone else maybe that's on your team, or maybe that got offered by the school you want to go to. Like everything's just kind of different, and it'll work out the way it works out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you mentioned the personalization of your journey. Not everyone's journey is the same. And the hardest thing is like comparing yourself to peers in the moment. Like, oh my gosh, like my best buddy just got like committed that year. I need to commit now. Or like, I need to like find a school that will take me right now. And you really have to just understand what's the best system for yourself to give yourself the best opportunity to find a place where you're going to be, make an impact. Also, where you're going to like to go to school. I know that on a lot of other episodes, we've talked about, once you get to college, that's actually just the first step. There's so much more in that journey. And so it's super important to, make that first step and get the opportunity to play somewhere. But that's just, you're just putting your foot in the door. Now you got so many opportunities, so many things that you have to balance. So finding a system that helps you get recruited, and trusting that and building knowledge along the way, that's super helpful. I guess going back a little bit more to your recruitment journey, what were the academic habits or mindset shifts that made the biggest difference in your ability to succeed as a student athlete at Davidson? And, we haven't mentioned this yet, but you took a fifth year at Colorado School of Mines as well. So can you give a little bit of perspective on that?
Yeah, so like just generally speaking, I think habits that you need to get into academically is like very similar to what is important and required to be successful on the field in college. And that's like the discipline of like being locked in and being present every single day when you're in class or you're sitting down to do work, is that you need to be able to shift your focus to what's kind of what you're doing in the present, and also kind of bringing an energy to everything that you do. I know like one of the big things that like my coaches always stress during practices was bringing energy, because if you bring an energy to everything you got, and that's like a positive, you know it's a positive energy, it helps you perform better in everything you do. I think those are two things that I would really recommend.
Yeah, it's also like contagious, right? Like you probably have the experience where you have other players on your team who are bringing that energy and you want to match that. And so if
Yeah,
you see
definitely.
someone who brings energy and like coaches see that and they
Definitely.
recognize that, like also to have the ability to bring energy in everything you do, you can't just decide one day that you're going to do it. It's a habit. And I love how you said that before. And discipline's a habit too. You can't just say one day I'm going to become disciplined. Like that is a part of a system that you need to employ every day into every task that you're doing. And it can be overwhelming at first, but the key is starting now. Like, how can you start now to where everything that you're doing, you're mindful, you're bringing energy, you're staying disciplined, and that can compound over time. So when that opportunity actually comes, you can present yourself as being the person that a coach truly wants.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I know a lot of families listening to this, and maybe like student athletes or parents themselves, they have a lot of young athletes face this balance between chasing a big goal. Like, I want to go and play play college football at Davidson or Alabama or wherever. Like this huge goal, but then also just enjoying the process day to day. So it's a fine balance between like, oh, chasing your dream, but then also just enjoying the process. So how did you learn to manage that? And what advice would you give to families trying to help their athletes stay driven without burning out?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
for
sure. I love how you compared Davidson to Alabama. That was
yeah,
funny.
the top.
Yeah, I think kind of what I said when it comes to balancing, I think it's just and I said this in kind of the last question, is being present with where you are and what you're doing. If you're always thinking big picture, then it's kind of hard to like be happy with what you're doing. And I think I see a lot of it is like like throughout life, it's like it's always the next thing is gonna make everything better. But like if you're not present and with what you're doing right now, then like one, you're not gonna be necessarily the happiest version or best version of yourself that you can be. So I think that's like a big thing with like balancing a bunch of things is just being present with where you are.
That's amazing. Also, if you're not present and then all of a sudden you need to be present, that puts a lot of pressure on you. Like if you're
Yeah,
not just
definitely.
taking every rep and putting in the effort, you start putting this, arbitrary pressure on like, oh my gosh, this tournament is going to make or break, or this game is going to make or break my potential to get recruited. And that's not the reality. But if you're not practicing and employing that like discipline and the consistency of like staying present, that can be really hard for some people to overcome mentally and like psychologically that, hurdle. So I love that the way that you describe that. I also think that, this is a little bit tangential, but this is super powerful and something that you've employed is a lot of families think recruiting is just about athletic talent. I just need to make my kid the best athlete as possible and they'll get recruited to any school. And in your experience, what role did academics, your discipline, and your character actually play in getting recruited and also like staying recruited? Because your identity helped you get into the Colorado School of Mines as well for a fifth year. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like a big so I'm not gonna say that talent doesn't matter because it definitely does, but and it really just depends on what level you're playing at. But I think when it comes to like comparing yourself versus another recruit, those are the types of things that like may get you an offer versus someone else that's on their board. If like, if there's, you're neck and neck, it's really either way with two people, like character and academics is definitely something that stands out to coaches. And also not limiting your opportunities. So at like the highest level, academics you can really have kind of whatever if you're playing at the Power Five level, but most people can't do that. And so, if you're not a Power Five kid and you're trying to go and play, um, Ivy Leagues, or if you're trying to go to like a NESCAC school, something like that, the academic standards are really high. And so, if you are trying to go that route, if you don't really lock down your academics, then you're going to be limiting your opportunities to where you want to go.
Wow, it's super powerful. Also, academics can be like some people think, I just need to like maybe crack to get like a 1300 or a 1400 on my SAT and then I'm done. Like then my academics don't matter anymore. But that's not the case because when you get to school, it gets more intense. So how have you kind of managed your academics while you were at school and did they ever butt heads with your athletics or how did you manage and balance that throughout your entire time at school?
Yeah, so something you said that I really had thought about coming into this was how academics doesn't end once you get to college. I would argue that your first couple semesters of your academic career in college are probably the easiest to kind of slack on it because you're in a new environment, you're in a whole new place, you have a whole new identity. But they're probably the most important academic semesters of your collegiate career, and kind of looking forward to jobs. That's kind of all they have to go off you, especially like early internships and whatnot. It's kind of how you do in the classroom, so it never ends, and the habits that you instill early on in high school are going to carry out through college. So that's like getting those kind of the disciplined habits early is very helpful to carrying that through college when you're on your own and no one's going to help you out.
Yeah, and so that's so awesome. I think a lot of people think, oh, like once I get to school, I'll have a little buffer time and then I can start working towards to get like an internship. But especially in today's environment, it's so competitive that, right once you get in, if you can build a good foundation in high school and that translates into college, you have way more opportunities than slacking early. And then all of a sudden you're behind the eight ball and you're like, oh my gosh, like I actually should have paid more attention because now I don't have any opportunities. So I think that brings up a good point where like when you take a fifth year somewhere or if you want to transfer, making a good foundation early on and establishing that can be super powerful because what you're telling the coach is that you have less risk as a recruit and that you're going to fit into their system. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about that experience when you went to Colorado? How did your foundation at Davidson help, make that transition easy?
Yeah, so I would say that transferring is not an easy transition, and some people do it. People do it for different reasons. I would generally say that if you're happy in a place that you're in, to stay where you are. The grass isn't always greener, but um, yeah, I think what really made it easier was kind of, and we keep talking about discipline and this and that, but like really like habits are so essential into being successful in transitory periods. When you're transitioning from one environment to another, you gotta kind of remember who you are and like what your identity is, and like you're rebuilding yourself, and things that don't go away are the habits that you create in previous circumstances. And so that's kind of what I encourage when you go from one circumstance to another. And when you're in like you're going from your teens to your college age years to early 20s, and you're going through all those transition periods. um, it's different every time, but every single time you kind of have to test yourself on just the habits that you build from a young age and carry on throughout each period.
That's so cool. And you mentioned habits, and this is kind of a nice, good segue into the future. A lot of people are like, wow, like I want my child to build the best habits possible, but they don't just appear out of nowhere. Those are seeds that you plant early on and you nurture them and you water them and then they grow and they flourish. So, did you ever have like a mentor or a coach or an older athlete who shaped your path? And how did that guidance change the speed or clarity of your own development?
Yeah, I think my dad was always my biggest role model in that, and just seeing how he like attacked every single day, and just like how he engaged with me and my brothers, I think really stood out as like a role model as far as how to carry myself. And then, as far as building habits goes, like throughout my college years when like he wasn't, or in my everyday life, my coaches were a big role model in that. Um, and it's, when you say like building habits, it's really not anything like sexy or anything. It's literally doing the little things that people notice. And that's being there early. That's bringing a positive energy. That's being dependable. That's being good at being coached, So if someone tells you to do something and it may come off as a personal attack at times, you really need to internalize that as they're trying to make you better, because that's if you kind of take it personally and shut them off, then you're not helping anyone. You're not getting better. You're not making your position better, and you're kind of just digging into not being the best version of you can be. Um, and so those are like some small habits that I've noticed that really go a long way, and people notice.
That perspective is huge. And I think that, kind of determines and dictates who becomes like a champion on the field or on the court or in the pool or wherever versus those who don't. Talent can take you a long way, but once you gain that perspective of like, oh wow, like, maybe that was like a small detail and like, why is he saying that to me? And you try and like compete with that mindset of like, I'm better, or like I don't need to do that, rather than saying, wow, this can help me if I just dial down a little bit, if I get a little bit better, and I can like, make the next rep a little bit better and I can stay focused. I think that perspective change is huge in what determines people who have, successful college careers versus not successful. And I think this is a great opportunity. You played on two collegiate teams. You played in high school. You've surrounded yourself with so many athletes. Like you played basketball as well. You also did like some track and field. So what separates athletes who like thrive in college or thrive in athletics versus those who don't, and those who struggle, and those who maybe even like quit? Do you mind talking about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I've noticed with all the people that are really really successful in their sport is that they love what they do. They love the game they play. They love the hard work that goes into it, not just like the, the attention that you garner from being successful in your sport. Like that's where real success comes from. And kind of being able to do things when no one's watching is really what I've noticed that successful people do. um, and it's, again, as we said earlier, is it comes down to the habits that people build. um, and that's what I've noticed with the best that I've been around, is that they just love what they do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, a lot of parents right now are probably thinking, how can I support my child without overwhelming them, without, having so much micromanagement or adding pressure? And I know you mentioned how impactful your dad was in your journey, but you probably have seen other kids who their parents are all up in their grill and like telling them what to do, and it kind of feeds into what you just mentioned, like they ruin their passion for the game. So if you could give one piece of advice to parents who want to support their child, what would that be?
Yeah, I definitely think that, um, I don't know if you watch football or not, or follow football that closely, but Mike Elko said something about when he was coaching his team, like his job was to be the opposite of whatever his team was feeling. So like in high stress environments, to be the rock that cools everyone down, and when people are like there's no energy, that he's the one that's supposed to be the one that's like hyping them up. And I think that like rings pretty true as far as supporting like anyone. I think that, and especially in like recruiting, which is very frustrating at times, I think that can be like bringing a different perspective can be really helpful in that aspect. And um, I think those words were just like really like cool pieces of information. I also think the recruiting journey is just different for everyone, and I think realizing that is huge, and being supportive of whatever, however that goes, is really important. And a lot of times it's just completely out of your control. And then when you go into these recruiting visits, or you're talking to coaches, like I think it's really important to think about how coaches are treating you um, versus how you're presenting yourself to them at times, because everyone's looking for different things. It's hard to you can't please everyone, and so you gotta look at what you're getting yourself into for the next 4 years when you sign on with a coach.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think something that you mentioned, and this also, reflects on the quote that you just described, is the ability to reset quickly. I think that's something that people understand when times get tough. Like, oh, okay, like I had a bad rep or I had a bad game, like let's reset. Like we gotta like, what am I gonna do to perform, whether it's in the classroom or on the field that very next day, or just like right now, what can I be doing to get better? But I think also what's super important and valuable is also resetting quickly when things are going well. Like when you win a game, when you like do well on a test score, like that was because of the system that you're using. And if you can reset quickly, then now you're in the moment, you're present, and you can like focus on what you can be doing to still get better, still build that momentum and compound your growth over time, rather than just like doing well and then like stagnating, like finding a plateau. So that's super valuable. And I love that quote that you just said, and parents can, internalize that to some degree as well, where it's like, when your child's not feeling great, like motivate them. But if things are going well, like don't push them so hard. Like let them enjoy the journey, but don't over like micromanage your children, because then if they lose the passion for the game, it's over. Like they're not going to, once they burn out, it's done. It's really hard to rekindle that flame. So that's fantastic. I think one last question for today is for athletes who, feel behind in the process or unsure if they're good enough with their own talent. What would you say to them based on your own journey across two competitive college programs to motivate them, to keep them, to show that, there's opportunities for them if they keep going?
Yeah, so one of the messages that I've said is that everyone's journey is different. Like, and this for in high school, it could be some people get offers their junior year or summer going in their senior year, just talking about the football recruiting process, or they can be getting their offer like on signing day. So someone can go from thinking that they're not playing, they're just going to go to school for school, to be like, oh, I'm gonna play sports in college now, literally like on the last day. So that's just kind of how it works, and it also happens in college too, where like sometimes you're someone that's gonna get their number called early on in their career, and some people don't get to play until their senior year, and that's just kind of the perspective that. That you need to have. I know everyone wants to be able to play early and get their offer early and be, like that guy, but it just doesn't happen for everyone. And being able to, push every day. And that's part of the love of the game, is that like if you really love it, you're going to be able to like wait till your moment happens and enjoy the process that goes into it.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, Mark, this has been fantastic. So many like nuggets of gold there, especially learning your own perspective, how you set a standard for yourself, but then have achieved amazing things and kind of have pivoted along the journey as well. Super fantastic. For everyone who loved this content, please subscribe below. Join our live events where we share, the frameworks which help build athletes to have the best opportunity to get recruited.